I'm just going to read three verses from Hebrews 11. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Noah's faith involved his whole person. His mind was warmed by God, his heart was moved by fear, and his will acted on what God told him. So my first thought when looking at this was how Noah's faith was visible to both God and to others. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowd? It's not always a good feeling. My eyesight's not as good as it was, and sometimes I lose Clive in a crowded situation, and a panic comes upon me, and I look round until I can find him or he finds me. Have you ever stood out like a sore thumb because of your actions? The one that always comes to my mind is as a young person in my very first job, which was in a solicitor's office up in Lincoln's Inn Fields, up in the Law Society area of town. I proudly announced and invited everyone at coffee break that if they were free the following Sunday, that they would be very welcome to attend my baptismal service at the church that I attended. Gosh, did I meet a wall of silence? I don't know whether who was more embarrassed, me or them, but it was what it was. And I did stand out like a sore thumb, but it was a pleasure to work with the people there, and they were very kind to me as a very raw 15-year-old in a very straight-laced profession. In Genesis chapter 6, we're told that Noah lived at a time when human evil was out of control. And I thought I'd read you just a few verses of Genesis 6 from the Message version of the Bible. God saw that human evil was out of control. People thought evil, imagined evil, 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 from morning to night. God was sorry that he had made the human race in the first place. It broke his heart. God said, I'll get rid of my ruined creation, make a clean sweep. People, animals, snakes, bugs, birds, the works. I'm sorry I made them. But Noah was different. God liked what he saw in Noah. This is the story of Noah. Noah was a good man, a man of integrity in his community. Noah walked with God. As far as God was concerned, the earth had become a sewer. There was violence everywhere. God took one look and saw how bad it was. Everyone corrupt and corrupting. Life itself corrupt to the core. And God said to Noah, it's all over. It's the end of the human race. The violence is everywhere. I'm making a clean sweep. But remember, God said, Noah was different, and God liked what he saw. Secondly, Noah's faith required obedience. God gave Noah a complete list of instructions on how to build an ark. I guess everybody knows the story of Noah's ark. And it's quite a popular toy, even with children who don't go to church. They all have played with a Noah's ark, probably at play school in my day and nursery in today's way of doing things. And the story of how the animals got rescued, it is a good story to tell to children. And I said to Martin in the week, it's a lot different telling the story of Noah to children than it is to adults. Because with children, there's sort of almost this element of excited fear. But really, to tell it to you as adults, there's this element of destructive fear of what was to come. Without a doubt, Noah stuck to God's instructions. This would have involved him in many months of hard labour. He had to build it from scratch. It wasn't in a kit form. He couldn't go to Wickes and say, I want so many pieces of timber and so many nails and so much pitch to put on the outside of the boat to make it waterproof. No, he had to source it all, and he had to put effort and time into it. It was costly. And do you know what? He didn't cut any corners. If he had have, the ark, when it was floating on the water, could well have leaked. Just imagine it. Trying to bail out something that size, it would have been really hard. It worked. He followed God's instructions completely. But you couldn't hide the ark. He couldn't go into the back garden and hide it behind the hedge or build it in the garden shed sort of thing. He had to build it in front of everyone. It was very visible. And in Genesis 6 verse 22, it tells us Noah did everything that God commanded him to do. So his obedience to God's instructions revealed dogged determination or faithful determination. Oswald Chambers wrote this: faith is deliberate confidence in the character of God, whose ways you may not understand at the time. And then thirdly, Noah's faith resulted in reward. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, their wives, were kept safe, along with animals, birds, insects. Everyone else perished. When God finally told Noah it was safe to leave the ark, he offered sacrifices to God, expressing his faith once more. God was pleased and gave Noah a promise that never again would he flood the entire world and destroy every living thing by flood water. God gave Noah the sign of a rainbow as confirmation of his promise. And Hebrews 11 verse 7 adds that God blessed Noah with righteousness. God offers us his gift of righteousness when we put our faith and our trust in Jesus, his sacrifice, his death and resurrection, which set us free from the grip of sin. Without practical righteousness in our daily lives, we lay ourselves open to temptation and sinful desires. In Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul describes how we too are in a battle against the power of sin and the forces of evil. It's a very strong, powerful passage, Ephesians 6. Paul urges us to wear God's armour, which will enable us to resist and stand firm. Righteousness is described as the breastplate of God's armour. It's worn over the chest, protects the heart and the lungs. These are 2 areas that evil attacks with great gusto. Our hearts express the seat of our emotions and engage us with love for Father God. And our lungs provide the air we need to speak to others, the truth of God's overwhelming love and forgiveness. In an evil and corrupt world, God's righteousness will cause us, like Noah, to stand out for truth and justice. Noah's faith was epic. Really was epic. I don't think I use that word very often about anything. I can't think when I last used it, but I think it's a really good descriptive word of Noah's faith. It was epic. He was a good man. He wasn't perfect. If you read on through the next couple of chapters of Genesis, you find that he also committed sin. He was like you and me. Couldn't help it. It was there in his DNA, I guess. It needed to be challenged and dealt with. He wasn't perfect, and thank God that he wasn't, because it encourages me to keep working at my righteousness, standing before the Lord. And he was a man of integrity who walked with God and then rightly earned his place in Hebrews 11 as a true hero of faith. So we read, "Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And by faith Noah, when warned about things he had not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. He must have been the subject of much derision and sly remarks, nastiness from his neighbours and those who came round. You can almost imagine if it had been in today's world, they'd have put on a coach trip to go and see the man building an ark in the middle of dry land without a drop of rain in the air at all. Just think of it. His faith at that time and his obedience to God was immense. It was epic. I know I keep using that word, but it really was on a scale of 1 to 10. It would have been 10 plus because he was asked to do an awful lot without being given the insight to know what was coming. And I read this lovely thought from Charles Spurgeon, and he said, "Faith goes up the stairs that love has built and looks out the windows which hope has opened." And I thought that was lovely. Our faith goes up the stairs that love has built. The love of God for his people, very evident by the way in which he sent Jesus into this world to die in my place. And it looks out of the windows which hope has opened, because faith gives us hope. And that has been my experience in my walk with God. My faith gives me hope, hope for the future, certainty for the future. And I try to live in his righteousness, guarding what comes in out of my mouth, and keeping my heart in tune with Father God and his wishes. So I hope you will be encouraged by the life of Noah, a true man of faith, an epic faith.